My husband had a secret habit until his mom found evidence hidden in his drawer. Before we begin, please subscribe and hit that like button. These real-life stories require careful research and sensitive handling. Your support helps us continue sharing these relatable human experiences. Now let's dive into a story about secrets, family dynamics, and unexpected discoveries. My name is Jessica, and I'm about to tell you about the most awkward, embarrassing, and strangely enlightening experience of my marriage. It's a story about secrets, not the kind that destroy relationships, but the kind that exist in that uncomfortable gray area between privacy and dishonesty. It's about how sometimes the things we hide from the people closest to us aren't actually bad, just deeply personal. And it's about how sometimes those secrets come to light in the most mortifying way possible. This story begins on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday afternoon in September. My husband Mark and I had been married for 6 years. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Ohio, both working full-time jobs. Me as a dental hygienist, him as an IT specialist for a local manufacturing company. We had what I considered a good marriage. Not perfect, because no marriage is, but solid. We communicated well, rarely fought, supported each other's goals, and genuinely enjoyed each other's company, or so I thought. The thing about marriage is that you never truly know everything about your partner, even after years together, even after countless conversations and shared experiences. There are always private corners of their inner life that remain hidden. Sometimes those hidden corners contain harmless quirks or preferences. Sometimes they contain things that, while not harmful, would change how you see your partner if you knew about them. Mark had such a corner, and I was completely unaware of it, until the day his mother found something she absolutely should not have found. Let me back up and provide some context. Mark's mother, Patricia, was what you might call an involved parent. Even though Mark was 34 years old, married, and living his own life, Patricia still treated him like he was her little boy who needed looking after. She meant well. I want to emphasize that because what happened later could easily paint her as intrusive or boundary crossing. And that's not entirely fair. She genuinely loved her son and wanted to help. One of the ways Patricia helped was by occasionally coming over to our house when we were both at work and doing household tasks she felt we were neglecting. Laundry was her favorite. Despite my repeated gentle suggestions that we could handle our own laundry, Patricia would show up with her spare key, gather all our dirty clothes, wash and fold everything, and leave it neatly stacked on our bed. Mark found this embarrassing. I found it annoying but mostly harmless. She was doing our laundry after all, which saved us time even if it felt like an invasion of privacy. We'd had multiple conversations about setting better boundaries with his mother, but Mark always struggled with confronting her. He was an only child, and Patricia had been a single mother after his father passed away when Mark was 12. The guilt of potentially hurting her feelings or seeming ungrateful always stopped him from being firm about boundaries. So Patricia continued her surprise laundry visits, and we continued tolerating them, and everything was fine, until it suddenly wasn't. The Tuesday it all unraveled started normally. Mark left for work at 7:30. I left at 8. We both expected to be home around 6 that evening. Neither of us had any idea that Patricia had decided today would be a good day for one of her laundry interventions. I was at work, cleaning a patient's teeth, and making small talk about her daughter's upcoming wedding, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. I was with a patient, and whatever it was could wait. But then it buzzed again, and again. By the 4th buzz, my patient noticed my distraction. "You should probably check that," she said. "Seems urgent." I apologized, excused myself, and stepped into the hallway to check my phone. 4 texts from Mark, each one more panicked than the last. "Call me when you can. Jessica, seriously, call me. We have a situation. My mom found something. I need to talk to you now." My heart started racing. My immediate thought was that something was medically wrong, that Patricia had come over and found evidence of some health crisis. I stepped into an empty exam room and called Mark. He answered on the first ring. "Oh God, Jessica, this is so bad. What happened? Is your mom okay? Are you okay?" "We're fine physically. But, God, I don't even know how to explain this. My mom came over to do laundry." I felt a flash of irritation. "Mark, we've talked about this. You need to tell her to stop. That's not the point right now. Jessica, she found something. Something of mine. Something I kept hidden." The way he said it made my stomach drop. My mind immediately went to the worst possibilities. Was he hiding substances? Evidence of an affair? Some kind of illegal activity? What did she find? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a long pause. Then Mark said, in a voice filled with mortification, she found my personal items, the ones I ordered online, the ones I thought I had hidden well enough that no one would ever see them. I was confused for a moment. Personal items? And then it clicked. Oh. Mark had been ordering wellness products, personal wellness products, the kind that adults purchase for private relaxation purposes, and his mother had found them while doing his laundry. Oh no, I said. Oh yes, Mark replied, his voice cracking slightly. She called me at work, Jessica. She called me at work to tell me she'd found concerning items in my drawer and wanted to know if I was going through something. Do you understand how horrifying this conversation was? I did understand, and despite the seriousness of his distress, I felt an inappropriate urge to laugh. What did you tell her? Nothing. I panicked and told her we'd talk about it later and hung up. But Jessica, she knows. My mother knows. And now she probably thinks, I don't even know what she thinks, that I'm some kind of deviant, that our marriage is in trouble. I'm dying here. Okay, calm down. Let's think about this rationally. There's nothing rational about this situation. My mother found my private items and now everything is ruined forever. After I calmed Mark down enough to get through the rest of our workdays, we met at home before his mother arrived for what Mark was calling the confrontation. He was pacing around the living room like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair, practicing and abandoning various explanations. I could tell her they're not mine, he suggested. Say someone must have left them here. Mark, they were in your underwear drawer, hidden under your socks. Who would believe that? I could say they're yours, that I was just storing them for you. Absolutely not. I'm not taking the blame for your private purchases. Besides, that wouldn't make the situation any less awkward. Maybe I just don't answer the door. We could pretend we're not home. Your car is in the driveway, and she has a key, remember? Mark groaned and collapsed onto the couch. This is the worst day of my entire life. The doorbell rang. We looked at each other with mutual dread. Mark stood up slowly, like a man walking to his own execution, and opened the door. Patricia stood on the porch holding a casserole dish, because of course she'd brought food, with an expression that somehow managed to convey concern, confusion, and disappointment all at once. Hi, Mom, Mark said weakly. Mark, Jessica. Patricia walked in without waiting for an invitation, set the casserole on the kitchen counter, and turned to face us with her arms crossed. I think we need to have a conversation. What followed was quite possibly the most uncomfortable 30 minutes of my entire life, and I once had to tell my grandmother I was an atheist at Christmas dinner. Patricia sat in the armchair across from where Mark and I huddled together on the couch, like defendants awaiting sentencing. She took a deep breath and began, Mark, I came over today to help with laundry because I noticed last week that your hamper was overflowing. I wanted to help. And while I was putting away your clean clothes, I opened your drawer to put away your undergarments. And I found, she paused, clearly struggling with how to phrase it, items that concern me greatly. Mark's face was approximately the color of a tomato. Mom, I can explain. I'm not finished. My first thought was that these items indicated some kind of problem, that perhaps you and Jessica were experiencing difficulties in your relationship, that maybe you were turning to alternatives because something was wrong between you. I found my voice. Patricia, I can assure you that Mark and I have a perfectly healthy relationship. Then why does my son need to hide these devices in his drawer like he's ashamed of them? This was the moment I realized several things simultaneously. First, that this conversation was going to be even more awkward than I'd anticipated. Second, that Patricia genuinely didn't understand that adults sometimes use wellness products as part of their normal, healthy lives. And third, that someone was going to have to educate my mother-in-law about modern intimate wellness, and that someone was probably going to have to be me, because Mark looked like he wanted the earth to open up and swallow him whole. I took a deep breath. Patricia, what Mark uses in his private time is actually completely normal and healthy. Many adults, probably more than you realize, use similar products for relaxation and personal wellness. It's not a sign of relationship problems. It's not shameful. It's just a personal choice about self-care. Patricia looked skeptical. But why does he need to hide them? If it's so normal, why the secrecy? Mark finally found his voice, though it came out strained. Because they're private, Mom. Some things are just personal, even in a marriage. It doesn't mean anything is wrong. It just means it's my business, but I'm your mother. I've always been able to talk to you about anything. Not about this. Mark's voice went up an octave. There are boundaries, Mom. Lines that even mothers and sons don't cross. And you accidentally crossed one today, which is awkward for everyone. But we need to acknowledge that this is private territory. Patricia was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Then she asked in a smaller voice, "So you and Jessica are really okay? This isn't a symptom of some larger problem?" "We're fine," I assured her. Mark's personal wellness routine has nothing to do with our relationship satisfaction. People have private aspects of their lives, even from their spouses. It's healthy to maintain some independence. I just worry, Patricia said, and for the first time, she looked less judgmental and more genuinely concerned. "I'm your mother, Mark. When I find something unexpected, my mind goes to the worst possibilities. I thought maybe you were unhappy or struggling with something you didn't feel you could tell me about." Mark's expression softened slightly. "I appreciate that you care, Mom, but this isn't something I'm struggling with. It's just personal preference. And the reason I didn't tell you, the reason I hid them, is because they're private, not because there's anything wrong." After Patricia left, taking her casserole with her and promising to think about boundaries, Mark and I sat in silence for a few minutes, processing what had just happened. "Well," I finally said, "that was absolutely horrible." Mark laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "I'm going to need therapy. Years of therapy. Maybe decades. Your mom means well. My mom just had a detailed conversation with me about my private wellness products. No amount of good intentions makes that okay." I couldn't argue with that logic. But as the initial shock and embarrassment began to fade, I found myself thinking about the larger issues this incident had revealed. Not just about Mark's privacy, but about our relationship and the things we don't talk about even with the people we're closest to. "Mark," I said carefully, "can I ask you something? Not about the products themselves, but about the secrecy. Why didn't you ever mention them to me?" He looked uncomfortable. "They're embarrassing." But I'm your wife. We've been together for 6 years. Don't you think we're past the point of being embarrassed about normal human things?" "It's not that simple, Jess. There's this whole cultural narrative about masculinity and independence and what men are supposed to be like. And using wellness products feels like it contradicts that narrative somehow, like it's something I should be able to do without, or something that makes me less, I don't know, self-sufficient? I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. So you felt ashamed?" "Not exactly ashamed. More like I didn't know how to talk about it without feeling like I was admitting to some kind of inadequacy. Which is stupid, I know. You just said yourself that it's normal and healthy, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two different things." This opened up a conversation that continued over the next several days. Not about the specific products or what Mark did with them, because that truly was his private business, but about the broader issues of privacy, shame, and communication in our marriage. I learned that Mark had been ordering these items online for about 2 years. He'd always been careful to receive the packages when I wasn't home, and he'd hidden them in places he thought I'd never look. Not because he was doing anything wrong, but because he felt awkward about the whole thing and didn't know how to bring it up. I learned that he'd felt guilty about the secrecy, worried that I'd be hurt if I found out he had private habits he didn't share with me, but he'd also felt entitled to his privacy, to having some aspects of his life that were just his own, and he'd been stuck in this uncomfortable middle ground of feeling both guilty and justified. And I learned that this whole situation, as mortifying as it had been, had actually revealed something important about our relationship. We had communication boundaries that we'd never explicitly discussed. There were things Mark felt he couldn't talk to me about, not because I'd be judgmental or upset, but because the culture around these topics made them feel taboo even between married partners. The aftermath of Patricia's discovery extended beyond just Mark and me. Word somehow got out. We suspect Patricia mentioned it to her sister, who mentioned it to her daughter, who posted vaguely about it on social media, and suddenly we found ourselves fielding awkward questions from family members who were just checking in to make sure everything was okay in our marriage. Mark's cousin Jake called him with congratulations on keeping the spark alive. Mark's Aunt Linda sent us a marriage counseling book. Patricia's book club apparently spent an entire evening discussing modern relationships and changing norms, which Patricia reported to us with a mixture of embarrassment and pride that she'd defended our right to privacy. The worst was Mark's childhood friend Brian, who thought the whole thing was hilarious and brought it up at every social gathering for the next 6 months. "Hey Mark, how's your personal wellness routine going?" he'd ask with a huge grin, until Mark threatened to reveal embarrassing stories from Brian's teenage years if he didn't stop. But as uncomfortable as all this attention was, it had an unexpected side effect. Other people started sharing their own stories about embarrassing parental discoveries. Mark's coworker admitted that his mother had once found his collection of romantic novels and assumed he was having an affair because men don't read romance. My sister confessed that our mother had discovered her journal when she was 16 and read detailed accounts of her first crush, leading to the most mortifying conversation of her teenage life. Everyone, it seemed, had some story of a privacy violation by a well-meaning parent. And sharing these stories somehow made Mark's experience feel less isolating, less uniquely humiliating. The most interesting development came about 3 months after the incident. Mark and I were having dinner with Patricia. We'd maintained our regular family dinners despite the awkwardness, because avoiding her would only make things worse. When she brought up the topic we'd all been carefully avoiding. "I've been thinking about what happened," she said, setting down her fork, "and I want to apologize." Mark looked startled. "Mom, you don't—" "Yes, I do. I've been coming over to your house without permission, doing your laundry without asking, treating you like you're still a child who needs my help with basic tasks. And while I meant well, I violated your privacy in a significant way. What I found isn't really the issue. The issue is that I was somewhere I shouldn't have been, looking through your personal belongings. I was impressed." This level of self-awareness and willingness to acknowledge boundaries was more than I'd expected. "I've been reading some articles," Patricia continued, slightly sheepishly, "about adult children and their parents, about healthy boundaries, about respecting privacy even when you care about someone deeply. And I realize I've been struggling to see you as an adult with your own life, Mark. I've been holding on to my role as your mother in ways that aren't appropriate anymore." Mark looked like he might cry. "Mom, I know you just want to help. I do, but help should be offered, not imposed. From now on, I'll ask before coming over. I'll respect that you and Jessica have your own household and your own way of doing things, and I promise never to go through your drawers again, no matter how helpful I think I'm being." It was a remarkable moment of growth for Patricia, and for Mark's relationship with his mother. The embarrassing discovery had forced all of us to confront issues that had been building for years, issues about boundaries, privacy, and the transition from parent-child relationship to adult-adult relationship. As for Mark and me, the incident opened up conversations about privacy and communication that strengthened our marriage in unexpected ways. We established explicit boundaries about what was personal versus what was secret. Personal meant private, individual, not necessarily shared, like Mark's wellness routine, or my journaling habit, or the fact that I sometimes ate ice cream for breakfast when Mark wasn't home. Secret meant hidden with intention to deceive, which we agreed we wanted to avoid in our relationship. We talked about shame and vulnerability, about the cultural messages that make certain normal human behaviors feel like they need to be hidden. We acknowledged that everyone has private aspects of themselves, and that maintaining some independence and privacy within a marriage is actually healthy, not a sign of disconnect. Mark eventually became more comfortable with his choices, to the point where he could occasionally joke about the incident. "At least we know my mom won't be doing surprise laundry anymore," he'd say. Silver lining. The wellness products remained private, as they should be, but the shame around them diminished. Mark didn't need to discuss the details with me, but he also didn't need to hide packages like contraband or carefully timed deliveries to avoid detection. They were simply part of his personal routine, unremarkable and unworthy of the secrecy they'd once required. Looking back now, 2 years after Patricia's discovery, I can say that while it was absolutely one of the most mortifying experiences of our marriage, it was also oddly beneficial. It forced conversations that needed to happen. It established boundaries that should have existed years earlier. It revealed assumptions and expectations that we'd never explicitly discussed. Would I recommend having your mother-in-law discover your spouse's personal wellness items as a method of improving your relationship? Absolutely not. There are much less traumatic ways to work on communication and boundaries. But I can say this: marriage requires constant navigation of the space between togetherness and individuality, between sharing and privacy, between intimacy and independence. Mark and I had been operating with unspoken assumptions about where those boundaries were, and we probably would have continued indefinitely, if not for an unexpected catalyst. That catalyst happened to be the most awkward possible discovery by the most awkward possible person, but it served its purpose. We communicated better afterward, we understood each other better, and we'd established clear boundaries with Patricia that made all of our relationships healthier. The truth is, everyone has private aspects of their life, preferences, habits, routines that are just for them. Marks happened to be discovered by his mother while she was putting away his clean underwear, which is quite possibly the worst-case scenario for such a discovery. But the fundamental reality that led to that moment, that adults are entitled to privacy even from their spouses, even from their parents, is something we should be able to acknowledge without shame or embarrassment. Mark's secret wasn't actually scandalous. It wasn't harmful to anyone. It wasn't a betrayal of our marriage or a sign of dysfunction. It was simply a private choice about his own body and wellness that he'd made, and then struggled to figure out how to exist with in a culture that makes such topics feel taboo. The awkwardness of how it came to light doesn't change the validity of his right to make that choice. It just made for one absolutely unforgettable family dinner conversation, and a story we'll probably be embarrassed about for the rest of our lives. But we survived it. Our marriage survived it. Mark's relationship with his mother survived it, and actually improved because of the boundary conversations it forced. And now, when Mark orders personal wellness products online, he can do so without the elaborate hiding schemes and anxiety about discovery, because the worst possible discovery scenario already happened, and we all lived through it. There's something freeing about that. When the most embarrassing possible outcome has already occurred, you don't have to spend energy worrying about it anymore. Mark's secret is no longer secret, not because he chose to reveal it, but because circumstances revealed it for him. And in the aftermath, we all learned important lessons about privacy, boundaries, communication, and the complicated dynamics of family relationships. So that's the story of how my husband's private wellness routine became the least private thing in our lives for several incredibly awkward weeks, and how we all somehow emerged from the experience as better, more communicative, more boundaried people. I still can't look at Patricia without remembering that conversation, and Mark still turns red whenever someone mentions laundry. But we're okay. Our marriage is strong. And we have a story that, while mortifying, is also genuinely educational about the importance of respecting privacy and communicating clearly about boundaries. And Mark's mother now calls before coming over, which is really the most important outcome of all. Thank you for watching this story about privacy, boundaries, and the complicated dynamics of family relationships. Sometimes the most embarrassing moments lead to the most important conversations and the most meaningful growth. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories about relationships, communication, and the awkward but important moments that shape our lives. And remember, everyone deserves privacy, even in close relationships. Having personal space and private habits doesn't mean you're hiding something wrong. It means you're a complete human being with your own individual preferences and needs. Respect that in your partners, your family members, and yourself. Until next time, remember that communication and boundaries are the foundation of healthy relationships, even when establishing those boundaries involves the most awkward conversation you'll ever have with your mother-in-law.